Happy New Year. It's the PGN Par 4 for January 2023. I'm Matt Gajtka, along with Zac Weiss. Only took us 4 months, Zac, but we're back together again. How about that? Everyone's stuck with us.
Yep.
That's all you got. Starting understated for a new year of PGN Par 4s. Coming up later in this half hour or so, live golfers going to get a chance to play in the Masters. That was our biggest news from the last several weeks, I would say. Also, our New Year's golf resolutions. We've done this every year. We've done the Par 4, which I think this is year 3 for that. So why not keep that tradition going? And also, we had some input from you on Twitter as far as what the best value courses are in the Pittsburgh area. So we'll get to all that. But for right now, let's go far from Pittsburgh, Zac, about as far as you can go and still be in the United States, and that is Hawaii. And we're talking about the Century Tournament of Champions, which is no longer the Tournament of Champions technically, because now it invites everyone who made the Tour Championship at the end of the previous PGA Tour season. But regardless, it's kind of an all-star-esque event. Still 72 holes of stroke play, but of course the views are gorgeous. And for those of us who are in the cold, dark winter months, which is a lot of us in the U.S. and around the Northern Hemisphere, it's quite enjoyable to just turn that on and enjoy what it's like in a different part of the world. That's, I think, for me, a big part of why I always watch this tournament is just to pretend that I'm there. Maybe one year I'll actually be able to get out there. But at the Plantation Course at Kapalua, the only par 73, by the way, on the PGA Tour circuit, Collin Morikawa blew a several-shot lead. He was actually putting well, Zac, for 3 rounds, but that went away in the final round on Sunday. And also, he had a couple of short-game miscues, borderline yippee motions with some chips and some pitches. And Jon Rahm had no yips whatsoever. He shot 10 under 63 to claim a victory by a couple of strokes. Not that I'm surprised to see Jon Rahm win, but you and I were discussing what we're going to talk about this week a couple of days ago, and we said, well, maybe not talk about the action at the actual tournament, but as it turns out, pretty newsworthy in now how Collin Morikawa has squandered a couple of leads in some so-called, I guess you want to say, silly season events. He blew the Hero a couple of years ago, and now here at Kapalua, this one an official PGA Tour event. And I guess I'm left a little cold when it comes to Morikawa, so we can start there because I keep expecting more from him, but the closer he gets to the hole, it seems like the worse he gets.
I think we can call this one Gike's got text game because I guess Gike is the only one that saw the band come out onto the field and end the kickoff return a little bit too prematurely here. There's no really other way. I mean, it's like they say when you run a race, you have to run through the tape, and Collin Morikawa did not do that at the time yesterday at the time of this recording, and it's a shame. I mean, here we are. What I wish we were in Hawaii right now. We'd still have a lot of day left. The sun would not be setting for another hour at this point in time. But that being said, I mean, Morikawa was known for the iron play, known for that short game, and that was where he kind of missed the mark at the end, his bread and butter. And I don't really look at this with too much. I mean, this isn't really a full-fledged field event. I mean, for it being kind of a marquee event, you still don't have a guy like McIlroy or somebody along those lines playing. So there's still some buts that are attached to it. But I mean, Jon Rahm has been a bridesmaid on multiple occasions here and finally got the opportunity to break through. But it the only thing that it really serves purpose is that you see the guys that you haven't seen for a couple months. You see a guy like Keegan Bradley who shed 30 pounds and frankly looks great, and good for him for finding a routine and sticking with it. But other than seeing a couple of guys in these gimmicky matches or everything, you haven't seen these guys for a couple months. And maybe there's an occasional good to see this guy doing this, that, and the other. But for me, otherwise, am I going to really go out of my way to see this? Honestly, probably not anymore. I'm not I'm a golf nut, but by the same stretch, I'm also a nut in my regular life with having to deal with 11-hour work shifts and things that regular adults have to deal with too. So I'll admit I didn't watch a single hole of this one, Matt. I don't feel any worse for the wear for that. I just didn't really feel an incentive, and it kind of dovetails into our point of, okay, so the average Joe like myself didn't watch this week. So how do you make it better? I mean, here we are, we're into 2023. we have our first golf tournament of 2023, and frankly, I didn't care enough to put YouTube TV or put Xfinity or put anything on. And for people like myself, who this is when maybe the wheels should be turning for golf, I didn't really feel inclined to do it or record it. So it's up to PGA Tour to figure out how can you incentivize it. And Matt, let's play some fantasy GM here. If you had the opportunity to be a Jay Monahan and you had a way of finding any sponsor to make this in any event you choose, what's the format? What are you doing and why?
Well, I would like to get away from always being 72 holes of stroke play. And maybe that's why I've had a little bit more of an affinity for what Liv's trying to do, is because I just find it monotonous. We've talked about on this program a couple of times at least. So I won't dig into all the reasons why I think variety is good. So I will just say that maybe this is the time for that team type of event. There are 30 players, I think, in the field, or at least it's a smaller field. Make it an even number. Split everybody up into two-person teams. Do like they do in that New Orleans event, the Zurich, which is in the middle of summer and really doesn't get much attention. This is when you want to do the team thing, because essentially everyone that is playing in this event, you know who they are, because they either did well last year or they've built up such a resume that they earned their way into this tournament, Rory McIlroy notwithstanding. But pretty much it was a who's who of who is still on the PGA Tour. So if you paired a Spieth with a Justin Thomas, obviously that would be the best case scenario. They'd have the most chemistry. They just played in the match. They're well known from their partnering exploits in the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup over the past several years. But you know what I mean? If you had a John Rahm and a Keegan Bradley, a John Rahm and whoever else, that would also be a star-studded duo. So maybe you have a little bit of a draft scenario. And you make it's already a loose event, Zach. It's not exactly the most intense scene there. There's not a lot of fans on site, so make it more of a made-for-TV type thing, and blow it out as far as making this not like every other stroke play event on the PGA Tour. I like the idea of rewarding guys who played well the previous year with the trip to Hawaii, and yes, you play in the Sony Open the next week if you stick around. That's the first full field event traditionally. That's this week coming up at Waialae Country Club. But this one should be the all-star game, in my view. There should be something on the line, but it should also be a little more fun. So I would go with make it a 2-ball on a couple of the days and make it alternating shot on the other days, and make it alternating shot on Sunday. Make it really interesting coming down the stretch. That's what I would do with this one.
Okay, I'm going to go completely off the wall here because I'm going to have an idea similar to how I dress. Let's just go off the wall. The field is capped with everybody that's won an event, and it can go up to 40 players total. Anybody that is in the top X amount is required to compete in this, with the ultimate prize not only being whatever denomination of money, but an automatic spot in the Tour Championship with a couple of strokes. So say you finish 31st. Well, you're at -2. You're guaranteed a payday. Say you're top. You finish first heading into that, and you're at -10. Now your -10 becomes 11, becomes 12 under par, and now it means something. So that's what you're fighting for at the end, an effort to incentivize getting in there in a big paycheck. Before the first round, there's this silly thing. All the rage on social media right now is different formats of golf. Whether you see on all of these YouTube channels, there's unique ways of knocking people down, different formats. Maybe you're playing left-handed and you're right-handed, so you're playing off-handed. Maybe you're hitting a shot with your eyes closed. Maybe you're hitting a blind tee shot, whatever the case may be. There's X amount of circumstances, and there's X amount of different matches till you cut it to 32. Then it becomes match play for those 32, with the final 2 going to face off on that last day, Sunday, into that final spot for a guaranteed spot in the Tour Championship, which again, if you finish 31st or lower, you automatically get in as that 31st person, chaos. And if you do make it in, then you get an additional couple of strokes, which automatically gives you a chance to make more money, which at the end, all these journeyman pros and all these other pros are looking for a chance to make additional money. This might be the difference between you getting $7.5 million in last freaking place. So you never know what might happen. And you know what? That would incentivize it. It would make more people watch, and it would be a crazy enough format that it might work where it marinates your idea, but it has some pomp and circumstance before, so that each day actually means something. And guys like McIlroy that are playing, or maybe guys that were really, really good that are in the top 15, 16 in the world but didn't win, still have a chance to make the prize. They're a top player, so they're naturally going to get eyeballs and social media. And it also helps them in this PIP where they can earn additional money as well. So ultimately, you say the cash is king. This is a chance to really put up and shut up and put your money where your mouth is.
Well, that's certainly a way to add some stakes to this thing too. So I think we both agree that it's an opportunity to mix the usual with the unusual and make this one stand out. Obviously, it's going to be tough to really edge your way in. It's the last weekend of the NFL regular season, so that's always going to take away some viewership. But it has always been good alternative programming at this time of year. The Tournament of Champions, whatever it's been called, going back now the Century TOC. But the PGA Tour in general has acknowledged it wants to make certain events elevated or designated, as they put it, on the NBC Golf Channel broadcast this weekend. And well, this will be a way to really make this one stand out because, as you mentioned at the top, it is a shorter field. It's not the biggest competition out there, and a lot of times it's pretty laid back. So you can amp it up in some certain ways and make it stand out. Make it like the Genesis, which has been elevated. Make it like a Bay Hill in the eyes of viewers. Maybe it's a fool's errand to try to chase viewership at this time of year, but I don't think so. I think January through April or May is a really good time to watch golf, and you see so many of the great tournaments, the old school tournaments, your Pebble Beaches, your Torrey Pines, the ones out west, the ones on the Florida Swing. There's a lot of really good golf on good golf courses and some storied tournaments for the next 4 months, and it's a great time for the PGA Tour to take advantage and also get the jump on their new competitors in LIV, which doesn't start up for another several weeks. Let's talk story of the year, Zach, in 2023. I already got to that one with my mention of the LIV Tour a couple of times. For me, it's how does LIV try to continue to generate buzz and attention when it's no longer the new thing? Now, this is their first full season. They have an expanded schedule and several more events in the United States. The United States events were the ones that moved the needle the most outside of the London event, which was the first one last summer. But I think it's going to be, I don't want to say a make or break year because the Saudis can keep this thing going as long as they want to keep emptying their oil-laden coffers. But at the same time, if you want to get people's attention, there's only a certain size of a window here is what I'm saying. And past a certain point, it becomes, well, it's just that old thing that never took off. As far as I'm concerned, LIV has to strike this year with either a couple more big splash signings. I'm not sure they're out there, but that would certainly help. But to find itself putting forth a more compelling product, whether that be through television production, whether it be through a TV deal, whether that be through format or some other way to make it stand out. So for me, it's that. It's the ongoing war between the PGA Tour and LIV, but now this is when the PGA Tour should be able to, I guess, have LIV play on their turf because the PGA Tour has been around for 50 years. LIV's only been around for one, and the Tour has that momentum going for it, whereas LIV is still trying to generate that early pace as it tries to move from a startup into something established.
I think the story of the year was how bloated Bryson DeChambeau got with all of his Orgain milkshakes. No,
No
in all
bueno.
seriousness, what's that?
I said no bueno. That's a little too much fake food for my taste, and I'm glad he finally came around on that one.
Woof. Anyways, in all seriousness, I mean, you could always say that Tiger Woods is always the story, the miracle of how he was even able to come on a golf course to begin with and even find any shots. That walk across St. Andrews just felt so familiar, but so different at the same time, and you can never overhype it. You could say what a tumultuous year this is for Phil Mickelson. It's the first real year we've said in so long that he hasn't been in the winner's circle, but he still very much has been in the story, from the whole Alan Shipnuck situation to him saying certain accusations against the Saudis, then walking them back. Why he walked them back, I think we know that, but there was a lot of moving pieces there. But I think you touched on the LIV point, but I think part of the story is also the inconsistent messaging and response from the PGA Tour and how to handle how much faster LIV rose attentive-wise than maybe they were expecting. And I think that it comes down to Newton's law of motion, right, Matt? For every equal, there has to be an equal or opposite reaction. And I think the tour didn't necessarily handle themselves so well. I think it was almost in a sense like when you had COVID and a lot of people didn't take COVID seriously. And I think the PGA Tour saw Live as that little bug, and I don't really think they took it as the bee or the fly that they should have necessarily taken it as. I think that fly can only grow with intrinsic factors such as what you said about getting a television deal, about being recognized by the official world golf ranking. They have to be feeling a little bit maybe better or worse depending on your vantage point based on this other separate tour getting recognized, and it's only going to make things even tougher by having it handled that way. So you have the PGA Tour, which has the equity of starting to match funds in the sense of making their players play more, have more money, have the best players playing more often, where they can't skip as many times. With McIlroy missing the TOC, so to speak, he has to compete, I believe, in every single elevated event for the remainder of the season. So by proxy, that's automatically going to get more eyes on television screens. Rory's the closest thing I think golf has to Tiger Woods right now, and I think that's pretty much universally agreed. He just draws, and his frankness and candor about his successes and his struggles and his inconsistencies are such welcome change when you have agents that are trying to control assets such as interview time, sponsorship opportunities, and every other aspect of a golfer's life that's not necessarily on the course by the second. But I think Liv's gotten to a stage, and Matt, you've had the opportunity to physically walk the grounds of a Live golf event, although you might be blinded by seeing a couple more mullets than you were expecting to see. But outside of that, you got some very good feedback from the Live brass, and right away, I mean, your neck of the woods, White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, TPC Greenbrier is going to be hosting an event next year. So you definitely were on the cusp of something, and you were the first to report being on something under this umbrella about Live expanding into this area. It's only about give or take 4 hours away from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So anybody who's eager or has the opportunity, I'm sure there might be some demonstrations given there's still some proximity to Flight 93, but there might still be some people that want to make that drive. I mean, 4 hours, that was the same drive to TPC Potomac this year. If you go to Dublin for Jack Nicklaus's tournament, that's 3.5 hours. So it's not outside of the realm. It's certainly an opportunity to see some golf and to see some guys that maybe you otherwise won't be seeing, at least for the immediate future, under this Live umbrella. But it kind of pockets down to what we mentioned earlier, Matt, which is the world golf ranking and how that gets handled through Live. It's that, and it's the TV right deals, which I think are the only two things that are really holding this back. It's the flavor of the month, so naturally you're going to have some interest, but golf is a sport where you're trying to engage younger individuals, and this new format might work for those younger individuals, but it's only going to last so long. And now the novelty of such few tour stops is kind of going out of the window based on the schedule, and that's only half of the schedule so far. So there's still a lot to determine, and these guys are going to be expected to play in all the events. So all of those remarks about playing less of a schedule are kind of out the window now. So now that this honeymoon period is kind of wearing off, and you realize that these guys are not going to be welcome back on the PGA Tour, you have that. And then you also have the PGA Tour in their response. They're letting some of these guys play an opposite field event that's not PGA Tour, that's not Live, but you also have to consider how really much you want to let them do that, because a lot of the guys they previously let defect are now on that other tour, that Live Golf Tour. So it's a tightrope that Jay Monahan, and by proxy Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy, among others, are having to walk. And how they respond is going to be very paramount, and how aggressive Live is, because let's not get it twisted, they've lost a couple of executives already as well, and the honeymoon period's over. So now they are feeling the pressure, and they are going to have to come up with answers sooner rather than later to keep this fresh, to get more eyes on it, and frankly generate some money. I mean, they might not ever see the break-even point, but their break-even point might be taking eyes from a tour and trying to make new ideas and grow, in their eyes, grow the game, whether you agree with that or not. And really, that is the only top story this year, as much as some individual golfers certainly and rightfully took their just desserts and headlines as well.
Right. And you mentioned Tiger Woods. He's no longer the Tiger Woods that we grew up knowing. So he's not going to dominate the sport. So I think it would be, or it should be, the story of the year, which is how this dynamic continues on. And the dynamics will be different in 2023 than they were in 2022. And you laid out pretty much all the ways in which that will be the case. So, yeah, no real breaking news bulletin here. That's going to be the situation to watch when it comes to pro golf, at least in 2023. Now, one of those massive stories that came out during the off season, one of just a couple over the last month or so in the world of golf, but the biggest one being that the Masters and its chairman, Fred Ridley, put out a press release a couple of weeks ago saying that all the players on the LIV Tour who previously qualified for the Masters via the criteria the Masters has laid out, namely top 50 in the world or a PGA Tour or a European Tour, or probably a PGA Tour win in the past year. There are other couple ways to get onto the menu, I guess you could say, for the Masters down at Augusta National. And so the Masters is, I don't want to say they're taking a step back here, Zach, but they are deferring to what they had previously said were the ways to get into their tournament. So I can respect that. I wasn't sure I expected Ridley and Augusta National to take a fervent stand against the LIV golfers, especially considering there's a couple of past champions among them. Well, more than a couple. Sergio Garcia, Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Charles Schwartzel. Patrick Reed. How could I forget about him too? So there's at least 5 there who have won the Masters, who are playing on LIV now. So for me, that would have taken quite a bit away from the cachet of the Masters, which is, hey, let's bring back all the old guys who've won this thing and make it kind of a reunion in that way. And also, the Masters wants to put on the best tournament it can. And if you're excluding some of the best players, as measured by the OWGR, then are you really putting on the best tournament that you can? So I guess I'm not surprised by this at all. And when Dustin Johnson joined LIV, Zach, I felt like this was going to be the case, that he was going to be able to play, and everyone who joined LIV and who qualified for the Masters was going to be able to play. Maybe it changes down the line, but I think the Masters is betting that one way or another it's going to work itself out with regards to the world golf ranking, with regards to these guys not being on the PGA Tour anymore, so they can't automatically earn an entry point that way. So a decision to be sure, but not the boldest decision either. And really it kind of fits with what Augusta tries to do. They don't like to rock the boat too much. They like to keep things fairly status quo. And I guess this is about as close as they can get to that sort of thing.
Augusta National just didn't want to become Southwest Airlines. Let's just face it, or TCU, based on how the first half of this football game has been going. But
spoiler alert.
you know what? They're watching it back on playback. At this point, they're kind of in on the joke. But the Masters has always been, in their minds, enriched on tradition. And yes, I think at the moment it's very convenient to just say, you know what? The champions, they're champions for life, and we're going to hold that. And everything else, we're going to respect the status quo. Our hands are up. Now, of course, it still has it doesn't rule out the world golf ranking mountain hole. And, you know, if retroactively they decide to count the rankings and these guys that are on LIV happen to qualify, then that should be celebrated if that's what the official world golf ranking decides to see as best fit. But of course, with the PGA Tour being one of those bodies that's making that decision, it obviously complicates things. And I think people that are very unfamiliar with the world golf ranking system think that, why hasn't this happened? This is a multi-plus year thing. The most recent league that just got approved actually was quicker than expected for the approval process. So LIV has put the paperwork in, and obviously there's some lawsuits that have to be settled as well. But those guys that are defending, that are champions at Augusta National, should be celebrated. This is rich in tradition. Would it make for some quiet dinners? Sure, but last time I checked, Greg Norman did not win the Masters, so it could be a lot more awkward than it is, especially given some of the remarks made by Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, and of course also Jay Monahan tried to be PC, then said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to put my foot down, step on it, and spit in it too. But I mean, that's within his rights. I mean, he realized this is an arms race of a different matter. So of course he's going to do that. But I think the Masters did the right thing for them. It was very, in a sense, similar. The USGA said, look, if they qualified, then let them have it. The Open Championship, it's an open championship. The term open is open. And I mean, if the PGA of America want to go a different route and defend the honor of the PGA Tour, and now granted there's separate governing bodies, of course, if they want to try to maybe not be that fourth major, I mean, either way they go, I think they almost have to follow whatever everybody else does. So they're kind of having their hands forced. And like we said last year, you and I both said it on a previous par four, that I think there's going to be a lot of waiting for what the Masters was going to do, and a lot of waiting for what the official world golf ranking is going to do. And if the world golf ranking rules against live, then everybody can say, look, the official world golf ranking says no, we're just going to go by whatever the world golf ranking says. And that's the end all be all. That's the bottom line. But right now, I mean, I think the Masters is unofficially almost the governing body because of its quote unquote tradition. And because they're saying, hey, defending champions, you're in, it's open. If you otherwise qualify, you can do it. But a lot of these guys, because the world golf ranking is not being counted, are losing serious ground on that. So it very well may be those aforementioned champions that are the only ones from Live that have a chance to play. You might not see Bryson DeChambeau playing at Augusta National. And it's amazing because a year ago he was doing that video with Dude Perfect, and now all of a sudden it's going to be Dude. You might be sitting at home on your couch watching the tradition. So it's going to be interesting to see how that situation develops over the next 3 months here, give or take. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But at least going in, Augusta National has made their stance and they've made it very clear what they're intending on doing. And it'd be hard pressed to imagine anything but a lot of other peers following suit.
You make a good point about Augusta National having not just the tradition, but it's also kind of an impartial, if you will, arbiter between the two sides. They don't have necessarily a vested interest in either side. Now they're more buddy-buddy with folks on the PGA Tour than they are on Live, but Augusta National could function as its own tour if it wanted to start a tour tomorrow. It could do whatever it wants to do just because of its stature in the sport. So not to say it can make its own rules, but it can come pretty close. And in this case, it decided to essentially not take a side. And like I said, I do appreciate that. They make it about the golf. Don't make it about any kind of stance and try to shift the politics of the game one way or the other, I guess, because, well, that's going to shake out when it comes to the courts, when it comes to the OWGR, and when it comes to the court of public opinion as well. And so we will go forward here, and we will see Dustin Johnson. We will see players like Cam Smith try to get his first Masters championship and his second major. So I think it makes for better stories all around, and that is good for golf fans because, well, it's going to be harder to catch all your favorite male players in the same spot than it ever has been before. And at least let us have the majors, right? That's the way I would feel about that if I had to look at it just strictly from the fans' point of view. The beauty of the sport of golf, though, Zach, is that we're not just fans. We're also participants. We are on the stage ourselves, albeit very small stages when we do tee it up. And obviously, we have goals and dreams and hopes for 2023 whenever we do get back out there to start playing. I've been playing my share of indoor golf up here in the Great White North of Grand Rapids, Michigan. But, hey, better than nothing. And it does whet the appetite for the real thing once the weather does clear. I'll start with you, though. What is your New Year's resolution if we're just talking about playing the sport of golf?
Playing the sport of golf. That's pretty much it. I
just want to do it.
I only played 3 times last year because
Oh.
I got more into the fitness game. I played the Bob O'Connor golf course where the golf club was going further than the golf ball. Obviously, I played at TPC Potomac and I played Muirfield Village Golf Club. So of course, one of these things is not like the other. Sorry, Bob O'Connor, but
I don't know what you're talking about. They all sound very prestigious and equally
they're very
challenging.
They're very prestigious, but 2 were tour stops and 1 missed the mark on that. But regardless of that, I mean, maybe it's a possibility of playing Quail Hollow this year. That is a serious possibility this year, and I would like to have the opportunity to venture to do that if I am able to. I would say that's a goal, just having the opportunity. I've never potentially traveled by plane to play golf, and it is a legitimate possibility. I'd like to obviously cover more. I mean, Memorial's obviously, knock on wood, feasible. I'd like to get back out to Toledo to cover the LPGA. and do it in a non-pandemic setting and just have an opportunity to see the gallery, because obviously having done that piece in 2020 when there were no fans, it's very different walking a tournament course when when you see more sanitizer bottles and soap and hand dispensers than actual people. And it was a very interesting sight. And obviously that's an article that if you're interested in going back to read my experience, it was a legitimately interesting experience. It was definitely worth not eating for the better part of 18 hours on the first day to get the opportunity to walk. But I would like to do that. I would like to not top every single drive that I hit off the tee. That would be really, really nice. And obviously, you want to get better and be in good health, right? And I think health is always a good golf and non-golf goal. You want to be mentally healthy. You want to swing freely. You want to swing with positive thoughts. And that's not always necessarily the easiest thing to do. And maybe, who knows, this will be a callback for you, Matt. Maybe I'll bury the hatchet with Shane Lowry this year. This American reporter might want to have another go. But in all seriousness, I'm hopeful to have the opportunity to enjoy golf this year, whether I'm playing it, whether I'm watching it, or whether I'm covering it in any capacity. I think that's a very realistic goal, and I hope to get the opportunity to do all three on a very consistent basis this year.
So Zac just wants more of golf in 2023. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to take a page out of the book, literally, of the reigning U.S. Open champion, Matt Fitzpatrick. But I don't know if you checked out the Golf Digest article a few months back, written by Dan Rappaport before he moved on to Barstool. But Dan is actually a former Northwestern student along with Matt Fitzpatrick. They got to know each other quite well, and I think that familiarity informed the piece. Part of the thrust of the piece, though, was on how Matt Fitzpatrick literally records every shot that he's ever played, basically, since he became a competitive golfer, whether it be high-level amateur or now on the professional side of things. I'm not saying I want to necessarily go that far, but I do want to record more. I want to get more information about my game so I can make better decisions about what to practice and how much to practice it. And, well, Zac, you talked about it. You got into fitness more this past year. I am very much into fitness. I'm a golf fitness specialist now, in fact, studying at Penn West University remotely. So I'm big into that too, but that doesn't leave as much time to strictly practice golf as I would like, especially with two kids. So when it comes down to it, I want to maximize my time. And so I have to just get honest with myself. I think a lot of the times that I have started a season, I've kept stats for a little bit, and then I've fallen off as I got discouraged by what I saw. So maybe it's just a fear of finding out the truth, but I got to stick with it this year. I got to be able to bite my lip and look and see exactly how many fairways I did hit or how many penalty shots I did incur over the course of a month's worth of rounds, something like that. So I know where to focus my attention. How is my short game? How is my approach game? And really nail it down. Be more specific about what I'm looking at so I can take advantage of what spare time I do have to play this beautiful game. So a couple of different looks at it here. What's your New Year's golf resolution? Leave it in the comments below or get at us on social media, PGH Golf. Now, speaking of social, we got a couple of minutes left here before we got to go. But Jordan Smith on Twitter asked us what's our favorite or what do you think is the best value golf courses in the Pittsburgh area. Now, our good friends at Moon Golf Club might have something to say about that. Zac, I know you enjoy playing out there. You mentioned the Bob as well, too. It's a unique place, but it's a place where you can get around for not very much money. It's basically pocket change to play at the Bob. So those are a couple places that come to mind for me. Also, Bird's Foot. It's maybe mid-range when it comes to the price, but it's a lot of golf. It's out there on Route 28, technically in Sarver, I guess, but it's past New Kensington, if you know what I'm talking about out that way. So, or in the New Kensington area, I should say. But those are some places that I think about when I think about good value, not just cheap necessarily, but amount of good golf for the dollars that you do pay. So any thoughts on that, Zac, before we go?
No, I think you pretty much hit it. Obviously, for me, Bob is within walking distance. Moon, I mean, really, in my opinion, value isn't necessarily the cost, but it might be more so the experience. Maybe you're looking for a hillier track. Maybe you're looking for something that maybe has a little bit more water or obstacles surrounding a green. I mean, do your research on what it does. I mean, hell, if value for you is getting the opportunity to play Oakmont, then absolutely, that's a hell of a value anytime you
Yeah.
look at it. I mean, and so on down the line. I mean, playing some of these exclusive golf clubs or getting an opportunity to be a guest of a member. If you have the opportunity to do that, I mean, there's stay and play packages where you can stay and play in places. Obviously, rest in peace with the 80 with the obviously the news about Nemacolin and Woodlands Resort. I mean, if you get the opportunity to stay and play, I mean, sometimes the value is more mental or sentimental than what's coming out of PayPal or the pocketbook or the checks, whatever the case may be. So my best advice would not necessarily be what makes your wallet happy, but do what makes yourself happy. Be like an 18-year-old, have your YOLO moment, if you will. But in all seriousness, I mean, there's so much variety in the golf courses in and around the area. You really can't go wrong. Just get an opportunity to try. And if you have a question about courses, there's all different kinds of groups on Facebook too, where you can say, "Hey, I'm thinking about this course. What was your experience there?" And you'd be surprised. People will share their experiences. But there's obviously your courses that are cheaper, that are more social, that have a good 19th hole. And then there's courses that maybe you'll give you more of a test if you're an advanced player and you're looking for something that'll push back a little bit. So do your homework, do your research, and then commit and see how it goes. That's my advice.
Two others I got to mention too before we sign off. North Park. It's a layout that previously hosted the U.S. Mid Amateur way back in the day. Maybe the conditioning is not as great, but again, very reasonably priced. A lot of golf course. And then South Park on the other side of the city. They've upgraded their greens. It's in awesome condition for a public city-owned or a county-owned course, as it were. All right, it's time for us to go. For Zac Weiss, I'm Matt Gajtka saying good night. Talk to you next time. Talk to you next month on the PGN Par 4. Happy New Year.